Hello and howdy do, folks. Welcome back to Film Studies, and you just got finished watching one of the great movies that's ever been made and a true testament to the power of the star system. And of course I'm talking about 1939, Hollywood's greatest year, Gone with the Wind. So let's go ahead and jump right into our notes for the day. Gone with the Wind is a 1939 American drama romance film adapted from Margaret Mitchell's 1936 novel of the same name and directed by the great Victor Fleming. The epic film, set in the American South in and around the time of the Civil War, stars Clark Gable, Vivien Leigh, Leslie Howard, and Olivia de Havilland, and tells the story of the Civil War and its aftermath from a very white Southern point of view. So when I introduced this film to you, I said that like Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind is sort of a fantasy retelling of the story of the antebellum South and the Civil War, as well as Reconstruction, from a very white Southern, I would argue, male point of view. And while some things are artistically accurate, there are others that are not so much. So here is the 1936 original cover of Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. And when people read that book, they just lost their minds in terms of the romance and the drama and the historical significance of the book. And when people read the book, they knew there was only one man to play the role of Rhett Butler, and of course that was the great Clark Gable. It was almost like Margaret Mitchell had him in mind to play the role. One of the things that is a problem when you're trying to take a book and turn it into a movie is the problem of length and depth. It's literally impossible to take every page of a book and turn it into film. I suppose it's possible, but we don't have 24 hours in a day to sit in a theater and watch a book covered in a movie from cover to cover. Just isn't going to happen. So because of the rather severe limitations imposed on the length of a film and on the amount of material it can successfully treat, a film is forced to suggest pictorially a great many things that a novel can explore in more depth. The novelist and screenwriter William Goldman sums up the problem this way. When people say, "Is the movie like the book?" the answer is, there has never in the history of the world been a movie that is truly like the book. Everybody says how faithful Gone with the Wind was. Well, Gone with the Wind was a 3.5-hour movie, which means you're taking maybe about 200-page screenplay out of a 900-page novel, in which the novel has, say, 500 words per page, and the screenplay has maybe like 40 to 60, depending on what's on the screen, maybe 150 words per page. But you're just taking a little teeny slice. All you're ever doing is extracting little teeny essences of the scenes in the book. All you can ever be in an adaptation of a book is faithful in spirit. It's impossible to be completely loyal to a book. At best, the film version can capture a small fraction of the novel's depth. It's doubtful that it can ever capture much of what lies beneath the surface. The filmmaker nevertheless must attempt to suggest the hidden material. The filmmaker's task is eased a bit if he or she can assume that viewers have actually read the novel. But we must still accept the fact that some dimensions of a novel are absolutely inaccessible to film. So there was great anticipation when Margaret Mitchell's book was being made into the movie, and people wondered who would be cast in all the different roles. And like I said, other than Clark Gable, who I think just was going to fall into that role whether he wanted to or not, some of the other big roles were up in the air, like Scarlett O'Hara. So there's Rhett Butler, played by the great Clark Gable. Didn't he do just a wonderful job in this movie? And he was just such a kind, wonderful fella in real life. For the role of Scarlett, the great Vivien Leigh was cast. She was a relative unknown at the time. Some of Hollywood's heaviest hitters were considered for that role. But Vivien Leigh, a British actress, was actually born in India when the India was part of the British Empire, that Vivien Leigh was given that particular role because she just sort of seemed like Scarlett, and what a complex character Scarlett was. So strong, yet one could argue spoiled. And there's Leslie Howard, who's played by the great Ashley Wilkes. We literally just lost Olivia de Havilland, and she played Melanie in this film. I believe that Olivia de Havilland was 104 years old and living in Paris, France at the time of her death. She was one of the last great golden age movie stars. And as a fellow I used to teach with once said, it almost was like that character, Melanie, was just sort of too good to be true. Nobody could ever be that kind. The film premiered at Atlanta, Georgia on December the 15th, 1939, as the climax of 3 days of festivities hosted by Mayor William Hartsfield, which consisted of a parade of limousines featuring stars from the film, receptions, thousands of Confederate flags waving, false antebellum storefronts and homes, and a costume ball. Urieth Rivers, who was the governor of Georgia, declared December the 15th to be a state holiday. The New York Times reported that thousands of people lined the streets as the demonstration exceeded anything in Atlanta's history for noise, magnitude, and excitement. Former President Jimmy Carter would later recall it as the biggest event to happen in the South in my lifetime. From December 1939 to June of 1940, Gone with the Wind played only advance ticket roadshow engagements at a limited number of theaters before it went into the general release in 1941. It was a sensational hit during the Blitz in London, as in like when the Nazis were bombing London, opening in April of 1940 and playing continuously for 4 years. All kinds of wonderful different shots in this movie. One that was directly influenced by Leni Riefenstahl, as we talked about when we looked at Nazi propaganda, was the boom shot or the crane shot. Shots execute elaborate movements when they go up and down through space. They take their name from the apparatus, boom or crane, on which the camera is mounted. A famous boom shot occurs in Gone with the Wind during the scene where Scarlett visits wounded Confederate soldiers at the railroad station. The shot began with a full-figure framing of Scarlett. The camera then pulls back and booms up to a high angle, showing Scarlett surrounded by a huge field of the dead and dying. This change of perspective creates a powerful dramatic effect by revealing the scale of the carnage surrounding Scarlett, a scale that the initial framing of the shot had concealed. Camera movement can work to reveal details and vistas by enlarging perspective. In this case, the boom shot reveals the true dimension of the war's carnage. So here we have, you can see my little mouse pointer there, Scarlett going to the railroad yard to look for the doctor, so the doctor will come back and help Melanie have the baby. But when Scarlett arrives there in the rail yard, she sees a scene of carnage where you have all these dead and dying wounded Confederate soldiers, and the camera pans back to this shot of the tattered Confederate flag, showing that the Confederacy's days are numbered and it is not long for this world. Producer of Gone with the Wind, David O. Selznick, first employed the term production designer on Gone with the Wind as a tribute to the importance of William Cameron Menzies' design sketches. It was these sketches and storyboards that would provide the unifying visual structure, helping to give Gone with the Wind its stylistic coherence. This contribution was especially important in light of the fact that several different directors worked on Gone with the Wind. George Cukor was actually selected to be the first director of this film, but was fired when he was getting behind schedule and things just didn't seem to be working out. But MGM put him in charge of a film called The Women, which was a monumentally big film. But sometimes directors just aren't meant for certain films. The man who gets screen credit as director for Gone with the Wind is the great Victor Fleming. But during production, as I said, Selznick changed director several times, and it was Menzies' design concept that would furnish the unifying visual structure. Menzies was a brilliant visual artist whose work has inspired generations of production designers. For that reason, he was sometimes referred to as the father of production design. So there's Victor Fleming, who would go on to direct Wizard of Oz that year as well. And David O. Selznick, producer of the film, with Vivien Leigh, who would win the Academy Award for her portrayal as Scarlett O'Hara. Undoubtedly, the most striking innovation of this era was color filmmaking. There were several attempts to introduce photographic color processes in the silent period. The Technicolor firm's two-strip system had been used occasionally in Hollywood during the 1920s and did survive into the early sound era. It was costly to use, however, and rendered colors mainly as a pinkish orange and greenish blue. In the 1930s, Technicolor introduced a new system involving a camera that used prisms to split the light coming back through the lens onto 3 strips of black and white film, one each for the primary colors. This technique was introduced publicly in 1932 in a Disney short cartoon called The Flowers and the Trees. Here's The Flowers and the Trees. It would actually win the Academy Award, the Oscar, for Best Technicolor Cartoon, as well as just Best Cartoon overall that year. And there's another shot. It's a wonderful little cartoon. Pioneer Pictures, a small independent production firm owned by a major stockholder in Technicolor, produced a live-action musical short called La Cucaracha in 1935. It demonstrated that Technicolor could render vivid colors with live actors in the studio. That same year, the feature Becky Sharp showed that color could add to the appeal of a historical drama. So here is on the left a scene from La Cucaracha, the very first live-action color Technicolor film ever made, and Becky Sharp on the right. Technicolor's ability to produce bright, saturated colors suggested that for some films, the extra cost, nearly 30% higher than that of black and white films, was justified. The majors began using color, but the Technicolor company monopolized the process, supplying all the cameras, providing supervisors for each production, and processing and printing the film. Today, we regard color as a realistic element in film, but in the 1930s and 40s, it was often associated with fantasy and spectacle. And yes, this was our very first color film in the class. And, the Technicolor process and its ability, to produce such beautiful colors cannot be overstated in terms of its importance on this movie. David O. Selznick knew that using shadow was an important part of a scene's visual impact and persuaded his color consultant to shoot Scarlett and her father in silhouette on the hill at Tara. With the plantation glowing brilliantly in the distance, the resulting framing effect powerfully underscores Gerald's feelings and importance about the land. So here we have the opening of the movie, the first silhouette we have. This will be repeated a couple times in the film, but that beautiful matte painting in the background, the silhouette, the shadow. Director Victor Fleming had to get real creative to work his way around the production code in this movie and use shadow to sort of hide or conceal certain things, such as Melanie having to deliver the baby. We have that brilliant shot of the shadow, the use of shadow. And while it was against the code to show someone pregnant, to show a woman pregnant, David O. Selznick has to suggest that birth. And he does this through the use of shadow and silhouette. Selznick uses the silhouetting to the same effect in the film's final scene, when Scarlett stands on the same hill as she comes home to Tara. Selznick also used shadow to emphasize moments that focus on the relationship between characters in Gone with the Wind. First seen in the form of the looming shadows Scarlett and Melanie cast on the walls of the makeshift hospital. Also that scene where Scarlett gets called in to assist the doctor to remove that fella's leg, and we don't see the guy having the surgery, which was also against the code, but we can see Scarlett's reaction to it, and we can see the shadow of men struggling, trying to hold the wounded soldier down right before they remove his leg. As I said, later the delivery of Melanie's baby is lit only with slivers of light that appear between window slats, the darkness making the scene more intimate and giving it a powerful simplicity. So there's Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. using nice use of shadow there. Another technique that Selznick brought from the black and white world of film to Technicolor was the use of matte painting. While a shot was being filmed, the area to be painted in later was masked with black matte paint on a glass screen placed in front of the camera. Later, a full-color scale illustration of the missing portion was shot onto the rewound negatives to cover the blacked-out area with calibrated precision. Like this shot, folks. This was a live-action shot of 12 Oaks, but the horse and buggy here are real, as is the road in this area. I hope you're able to follow my pointer. But all this back in here, folks, is a matte painting. That's not real. So we shoot the foreground first, and we put black tape sort of over all this area. And then what we do is we go and loop this shot of the horse and buggy riding into 12 Oaks over the top of this matte painting that covers up the rest of the area back here. Previously used only for background shots, Gone with the Wind's special effects cinematographer adapted the technique to complete a number of sets that were only partially finished. Tara's side views, outhouses, and background vegetation were all matte paintings, as were portions of the 12 Oaks plantation as you just saw, the train station roof, the decorations in the old armory, an entire street of burning houses, and even some of the wounded soldiers lying on the ground in long shots. Today, filmmakers and audiences alike are becoming more and more sensitive to the power of color in movies. Various organizations such as the American Film Institute and the television cable channel American Movie Classics are making extraordinary efforts to preserve the great films of our past and especially to recapture their gorgeous fading colors. Recently, for example, in preparation for yet another re-release of Gone with the Wind, the most popular film's Technicolor values were restored primarily through what's known as a dye transfer. Director Martin Scorsese has observed that color in Gone with the Wind is important because it reflects the drama and a certain style. Scorsese says that Gone with the Wind's improved look also even affects the audience on an emotional and psychological level, evoking the spirit of the Old South. He believed that it was as important as the film, as the production design or the costuming or the direction of the film to see it in its proper color. Now, we had some African American actors. Unlike The Birth of a Nation, where there were no leading African American actors, we did have some very important roles played by African American actors in this particular movie. And as you guys know, with the level of racism that African Americans encountered in the 1930s, the studio era was quite painful for many African Americans who endured a great deal of racism. Hattie McDaniel, who played the role of Mammy in Gone with the Wind, actually felt very conflicted about playing that character. Wasn't she wonderful, though? My goodness, that movie would not have been the same without her. And Mammy's sole purpose in that story was to look after her white master, Scarlett. Hattie McDaniel reconciled herself to the task by deciding that it was actually better to play a maid on film than having to work as one in real life. So Mammy, Hattie McDaniel's character, was one she felt very conflicted about playing. But my goodness, she did such a good job, and quite appropriately was given the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in that film. Hattie McDaniel, listen to this, folks. Hattie McDaniel, as well as the other black actors in the film, were actually prevented from attending the premiere of Gone with the Wind in Atlanta due to Georgia's Jim Crow laws, which would have kept them from sitting with the white members of the cast. So they weren't even going to be allowed to sit with the white members of the cast like Clark Gable and Olivia de Havilland and Vivian Leigh. Upon learning that Hattie McDaniel had been barred from the premiere, Clark Gable threatened to boycott the event. And it was Hattie McDaniel who convinced him to attend. She told him, he had to go because the success of the movie depended on it. So he finally listened to what she had to say and decided to go forward and go to the premiere of the movie. But wasn't she just wonderful? And there she is, Hattie McDaniel. Now, she wasn't the first African-American actress to be nominated for an Academy Award, but she was the very first black performer ever to win an Oscar that she won for Best Supporting Actress. Although legend persists that the Hayes office actually fined David O. Selznick $5,000 for using the word damn in Butler's exit line. In fact, the Motion Picture Association Board passed an amendment to the production code on my birthday in 1939, forbidding the use of words like hell or damn except when their use shall be essential and required for portrayal in proper historical context of any scene or dialogue based on historical fact or folklore, or a quotation from a literary work, provided that no such use shall be permitted which is intrinsically objectionable or simply offensive to good taste. With that amendment, the Production Code Administration had no further objection to Rhett's closing line. He had been through so much, I think everybody really couldn't blame him. Gone with the Wind received 10 Academy Awards, a record that would stand for over 20 years. In the American Film Institute's inaugural Top 100 American Films of All Time list of 1998, it was ranked number 4. Although in the 2007 10th anniversary edition of that list, it was dropped 2 places to number 6. In June of 2008, the American Film Institute revealed its 10 Top 10, the best 10 films in 10 American film genres. And after polling over 1,500 persons from the creative community, Gone with the Wind was acknowledged as the 4th best film in the epic genre. Gone with the Wind has sold more tickets in the United States than any other film in movie history, and is considered a prototype of the Hollywood blockbuster. Today, Gone with the Wind is considered one of the greatest and most popular films of all time, and one of the most enduring symbols of the golden age of Hollywood. Gone with the Wind remains the highest ticket-selling film of all time in North America and the United Kingdom. Isn't that something? And if you enjoyed the film, you can purchase it on Blu-ray, a beautifully restored print where the colors are vivid and the soundtrack restored, and you get lobby cards and all kinds of little things to go along with your Blu-ray special edition that can be purchased on Amazon. Pardon me. Well, I hope you all really enjoyed Gone with the Wind, not only the movie, but hearing a little bit about it today. And we will talk to you soon. Have a great day, everybody.